4 years ago, I was fighting cancer and planning a future with the woman I loved. She left me in a text message because I was too sick. What she didn't know was that I kept every receipt. And sometimes revenge doesn't shout, it waits. If you've ever been abandoned when you needed someone the most, this story is for you. Make sure you're subscribed, because this isn't just about revenge, it's about consequences. When I met her, my life finally felt stable again. I wasn't looking for anything dramatic or reckless. I'd already lived through enough loss for one lifetime. My wife had died years earlier, when our children were barely old enough to understand what death meant. I raised my daughter mostly on my own, learning how to function on autopilot, work, parenting, sleep, repeat, without ever really opening myself up to anyone. Then she moved into the neighborhood. She was confident, established, warm in a way that didn't feel forced. She had her own house, her own career, her own life, and a daughter almost exactly 10 years younger than mine. We were neighbors first, then friends, then slowly something more. There was no rush, no chaos, just two adults building trust the way you're supposed to. For 4 years it worked. We owned homes a few streets apart. Our daughters got along. Weekends blurred together, holidays overlapped. We talked about the future like it was a shared assumption, not a question. And when she was diagnosed with a neurological disease, the kind doctors speak about carefully, with pauses and softened voices, we talked about adapting, not escaping. She would eventually need a wheelchair. So we planned for it. We talked marriage. We talked about building a house together, one designed to be Ada-friendly, wide halls, no stairs, everything future-proofed. Not because we were scared, but because that's what you do when you commit to someone long-term. You plan for the worst and promise to stay anyway. During those planning months, I started working on her house. I run a construction business on the side. It's clean, licensed, insured, not some under-the-table operation. The idea was simple: increase the resale value of her place before we sold it to fund the new build. Landscaping, structural upgrades, fixes she'd been putting off for years. I spent close to $30,000. Every job was invoiced, every permit filed, every dollar tracked. We had a contract and payment upon sale of the house. I never chased her for money, never reminded her we were partners, this was our future. Then, about 6 months into finalizing plans, my body started to betray me. It began with nausea that wouldn't go away, then vomiting, then blood. I noticed my stomach swelling, not weight gain, but something wrong, something foreign. I was eating clean, training regularly. This didn't make sense. Doctor's visits turned into tests. Tests turned into more tests. While that was happening, her condition worsened too. Stress from her job was accelerating her symptoms, so she stepped down to a lower position. Took a $20,000 pay cut. I supported that decision without hesitation. We were a team. We'd adjust. Then the biopsy results came back. A tumor, golf ball sized, in my stomach. Cancer. The word lands differently when it's said to you. It doesn't echo. It sinks. It presses inward. Suddenly everything, plans, timelines, futures, goes quiet. Treatment started fast. Chemotherapy, radiation. Days that blurred into pain and nausea and exhaustion so deep it felt like gravity had doubled. She helped at first. She stayed over. She cleaned. She drove me to treatments. Her daughter spent more time at my house than hers. For a while, it felt like this was just a hard chapter we'd get through together. That's when I suggested we consolidate. Sell one house, move in together temporarily. My insurance and long-term illness plan would cover most of the medical costs. The sale would ease financial pressure on her. It made sense, logically, practically, as a couple. And that's when everything changed. She pulled away quietly at first. Her daughter stopped coming over. She had excuses. Work ran late. She was tired. She stopped staying the night, stopped driving me to treatments, phone calls shortened, texts replaced conversations. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed. No warning, no conversation, just a message. I love you, but I can't see myself taking care of someone this sick in the long term. I don't think we should see each other anymore. A text message. That's how 4 years ended. I stared at the screen longer than I'd like to admit. Not angry, not shocked, just hollow. This was the first woman I'd planned a life with since my wife died. And just like that, I was alone again. Sick, weak, and discarded for being inconvenient. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I packed her things the next day, neatly, carefully, calmly. And when I carried the last box to her back porch, trying to avoid any unnecessary pain, I saw her through the window, on the couch, with the man she'd always introduced as a lifelong friend. And in that moment, standing there with cancer still burning through my body, something inside me went completely silent. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream. I simply left the box and walked away. But what I didn't know yet, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that the most expensive part of leaving me hadn't even begun. After that night, I didn't sleep. Not the kind of dramatic, wide-eyed insomnia you see in movies, just shallow, broken rest. I'd drift off for 20 minutes, then wake up drenched in sweat, my stomach aching, my mind replaying the same images on a loop. The text message, the couch, the man I'd trusted. The quiet realization that while I was fighting to stay alive, she had already started a different life. Cancer does strange things to your sense of time. Days stretch, but weeks disappear. Treatments dictated my schedule now. The chair in the infusion room became familiar in a way no one ever wants. The antiseptic smell, the hum of machines, other patients staring into nothing, each of us locked in our own private war. And through all of it, she was gone. No check-ins, no apologies, no explanation beyond that sentence. I told myself to be mature. I repeated that word like a mantra. Be mature, let it go, focus on surviving. I had a daughter watching me. I couldn't afford to fall apart, so I didn't. Outwardly, at least. I handled things quietly. I focused on my health, on getting through each treatment, on making it home without vomiting in the driveway, on pretending that the future I'd planned hadn't just evaporated overnight. But grief doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like your hands shaking when you reach for paperwork. Sometimes it looks like anger that arrives months late, once the shock wears off and the truth finally settles in. 8 or 9 months passed before the last missing piece fell into place. I ran into his ex-girlfriend by chance. A mutual friend, distant enough that the conversation stayed polite until she hesitated. That pause people make when they're deciding whether to say something they shouldn't. She told me they'd broken up. She told me why. He'd confessed to sleeping with my ex, not recently, not accidentally, but dating back to the same time we were finalizing drawings on the house. The same months I was vomiting blood. The same weeks she was telling me she loved me while quietly stepping away. I thanked her for telling me. And when I hung up, I didn't feel sadness. I felt clarity. That's when the anger finally arrived. Slow, controlled, and ice-cold. Not the kind that makes you reckless, the kind that makes you methodical. I had finished chemo and radiation by then. Still weak, but stronger, my head clearer, my energy returning in small increments. I started catching up on life. Bills, mail, documents I'd ignored while just trying to survive. That's when I found the folder. Thick, labeled, organized, invoices, every landscaping job, every structural upgrade, every hour of labor, every permit fee, every material cost, all of it, totaling $32,680, unpaid, 19 months overdue. I stared at the number longer than I'd stared at that text message. Not because I was shocked, because I'd forgotten. In the chaos of illness and heartbreak, I'd completely pushed it out of my mind. The contract, the agreement, the understanding that payment would be made when the house sold. And suddenly, everything clicked. She hadn't just left emotionally. She'd walked away assuming the past was erased. I didn't feel triumphant yet. I didn't feel vengeful. What I felt was something far more dangerous, justified. I sent the folder to my attorney the same day. No warning, no emotional note, just documentation. He called me back after reviewing it. "You're well within your rights," he said, "and if you're going to act, now is the time." She was preparing to list the house. The timing was almost surgical. Lien proceedings moved quickly, interest accrued, legal fees stacked on top. It wasn't aggressive, it was procedural, impersonal, exactly the kind of justice that doesn't feel like revenge until it is far too late to stop. I didn't contact her, I didn't gloat, I let the paperwork speak. Weeks passed, then months, and when the house finally sold, the math was brutal. After settling the mortgage, attorney fees, interest, and the overdue invoices, she walked away with around $10,000. That was it. Not enough to buy another home. Not enough to recover. She backed out of a purchase she'd already committed to, moved in with her oldest daughter, son-in-law, and 2 grandchildren. Left her job and went on disability. I didn't hear any of this from her. News like that travels on its own. For a long time, I felt empty, not satisfied, not proud, just calm. The kind of calm that comes after something irreversible has already happened. I told myself it wasn't revenge, it was accountability, a delayed consequence. The final bill for a life she walked away from without settling the balance. A year later, I saw her again. She looked like she'd aged 2 decades, thinner, tired, sitting in the wheelchair we'd once planned for. We spoke briefly, cordially, strangers who shared too much history to ever be comfortable. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong, because some stories don't close quietly. Some come back, asking to be reopened. Seeing her in that wheelchair should have done something to me. That's what I expected, at least. Guilt, sadness, regret. Some kind of emotional backlash that would make me question everything I'd done. I'd replayed that moment in my head before it ever happened. The imagined version, where I'd see her broken down, frail, and I'd feel like a monster for letting the lean go through. But when it actually happened, none of that came. What I felt was distance, not coldness, not cruelty. Just a clean emotional separation, like looking at a chapter of a book you already finished reading. We spoke politely, carefully, the way people do when they both know there's a minefield under every sentence. She asked how I was doing. I told her I was well. She said she was managing. I nodded, wished her the best, and walked away. And that should have been the end. But life doesn't always let you close doors cleanly. A few days later, my phone rang. It was her younger daughter. She sounded nervous, respectful. She told me she'd heard from her mom that we'd run into each other and wondered if maybe we could hang out sometime, catch up, talk. I gave a vague answer, thanked her for calling, told her I'd think about it. And then I went on with my day. A week passed. Then my phone rang again. This time, it was her. Her voice was different, softer, fragile in a way I'd never heard before. She apologized, not dramatically, not desperately, just a steady stream of regret, carefully worded, like she'd practiced it. She said she'd handled things poorly, that she'd been scared, that she hadn't been thinking clearly. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. When she finished, I thanked her for calling and hung up. That's when the texts started. At first, they were spaced out, harmless, checking in, asking how I was feeling, commenting on memories we used to share, vacations, dinners, inside jokes that now felt like artifacts from someone else's life. I didn't encourage it, but I didn't block her either. Not because I wanted reconciliation, because I wanted closure. Weeks went by like that, her messages slowly becoming longer, more emotional, less cautious. Until one night, a text came through that stopped me cold. She asked if I could ever see us rekindling what we had. I stared at the screen, not shaking this time, not broken, just aware. Aware of how strange it was that the moment I was healthy again, financially stable again, emotionally independent again, she was back. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I typed slowly, carefully. I can't see myself taking care of someone so sick in the long term. I paused. Then I added the line that had lived in my head for years. Remember the box on your back porch? Another pause. Did you think your lifelong friend brought that over from my house? I ended it simply. Good luck to you. Goodbye. I didn't wait for a response. I blocked the number. And in that moment, something inside me finally exhaled. Not triumph, not joy, release. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't loud. It doesn't come with applause or satisfaction the way people imagine. It comes with stillness, with finality, with the knowledge that you didn't to chase justice, you allowed it to arrive on its own terms. For years, I'd wondered whether I'd gone too far, whether the lean was excessive, whether throwing her words back at her was cruel, whether illness, hers or mine, should have changed the outcome. But the truth is simple. She made her choice when things got hard. I made mine when things got clear. I didn't destroy her life. I simply refused to protect her from the consequences of leaving mine unfinished. And once I understood that, the guilt faded. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to sleep again. Enough to move forward. Enough to stop replaying the past like a courtroom argument that never ended. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't about winning. It's about closing the account and never looking back. The funny thing about revenge is that people imagine it as a moment, a single dramatic scene, a raised voice, a look of horror on someone's face when they realize they've lost. But that's not how it usually happens. Real revenge is administrative. It's procedural. It's paperwork moving through systems that don't care about feelings. And once it's set in motion, it doesn't stop just because someone regrets their choices. After I blocked her number, life didn't suddenly become cinematic. There was no swell of music, no immediate sense of victory, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm has already passed, and all that's left is the damage assessment. I went back to my routines: work, gym, follow-up scans, slowly rebuilding strength after months of chemo and radiation. My body still felt like it belonged to someone else, weaker, slower, scarred in ways you don't see in mirrors. But every day, I felt more like myself again. And every so often, through mutual acquaintances or casual conversation, I'd hear pieces of the aftermath. The house sale had been a disaster, not dramatic, just devastating in the way only money problems can be. Buyers walked once the lien surfaced. Agents stopped returning calls. Deadlines passed. Rates shifted. The market didn't wait for her. When the sale finally went through, most of the proceeds vanished before she ever saw them. Attorney fees, interest, settlement costs. The invoices, my invoices, paid in full, just as the contract stated. What was left barely covered her remaining obligations. The house she'd planned to buy, gone. She moved in with her oldest daughter, her son-in-law, and 2 grandchildren. A home that wasn't designed for her condition. Too narrow, too cramped, too many stairs. The exact opposite of the life we'd planned. She left her job not long after. Disability paperwork replaced performance reviews. Doctor visits replaced meetings. The future she'd once stepped away from became a past she couldn't return to. And I watched all of it from a distance, not with satisfaction, with clarity. A little over a year later, I ran into her by chance. Grocery store parking lot, middle of the afternoon. She looked smaller somehow, thinner, older than her years. Sitting in the wheelchair we'd once talked about in abstract theoretical terms, something for later. Later had arrived. We spoke briefly, polite, civil. 2 people who once shared a life, now reduced to neutral small talk. She asked how I was doing. I told her the truth. I'm good. And I was. After I walked away, I realized something important. I didn't feel powerful. I felt free. Free from wondering if I'd done enough. Free from imagining alternate endings. Free from the weight of unfinished business. A few days after that encounter, her daughter called me, the younger one. Nervous again, kind. Asking if maybe we could spend some time together. Talk. Catch up. I declined gently. Not out of anger. Out of boundaries. Then came the call from her. The apologies, the explanations, the regret wrapped in hindsight, and finally the question that led to my last message, the one that ended everything for good. When I blocked her number that night, I sat in my kitchen for a long time afterward. No lights on. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own breathing. I thought about my wife, about the years after she died, about how long it had taken me to trust someone again, and I realized something I wish I'd known sooner. Loving someone doesn't obligate you to protect them from consequences, especially when they abandon you at your most vulnerable. I didn't seek revenge in a fit of rage. I didn't act impulsively. I didn't fabricate anything. I enforced a contract. I honored the agreement we both signed. I allowed reality to do the rest. Sometimes I feel a flicker of guilt, not much, not often. And when I do, I remind myself of the text that ended our relationship. The moment she decided that sickness made me disposable, that love had limits, and she'd found them. Because if you can walk away from someone when they're fighting for their life, you don't get to ask for mercy later. That's the final receipt. Not anger, not cruelty, accountability. People ask me sometimes if I'd do it again. The answer isn't yes or no. The answer is that I wouldn't change anything I did, because everything I did was honest. I loved fully. I planned responsibly. I protected myself when I was left unprotected. And when the dust settled, I walked away without needing to explain myself to anyone. Revenge stories often end with celebration. This one ends with peace. If you've ever been betrayed when you were at your lowest, if someone walked away when you needed them most, if you've ever been underestimated because you were vulnerable, remember this story. Sometimes justice doesn't come with shouting or confrontation. Sometimes it arrives quietly, with paperwork, patience, and time. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share the final receipt. More true stories, more quiet justice, more lessons they never thought they'd have to learn. Because some debts don't disappear. They just wait to be collected.